In the early 2010s, Legendary Pictures had announced the production of a new Godzilla film geared towards Western audiences. This new take on Godzilla was set to be a much darker and faithful adaptation, harking back to the grim horrors of the original 1954 Godzilla film. The result was Godzilla 2014, which ended up being the 30th Godzilla movie. The film, while certainly dark and closer to the roots of the character, garnered mixed reviews. While the drama and atmosphere embedded in the cinematography and the screenplay were applauded, the monster fight scenes left a lot to be desired, as the camera would often cut away from the monster action in favor of showing the human characters engaging in dialogue. Still, the look and design of the character pleased fans as it resembled the beloved Japanese designs of the character, which were consistent throughout the entire series. The film also featured Godzilla doing battle with a new and original monster, which breathed new life into the series. Following the prodigious box office success of Godzilla 2014, it was announced that the film was the start of a new cinematic universe known as the Monsterverse, in which every legendary Godzilla film would be connected. The subsequent installment was 2017's Kong Skull Island, which, while technically a Godzilla-free film for the most part, was still attached to the Monsterverse except set the stage for Kong's inclusion into the ambitious cinematic universe. The film was absolutely stunning, set during the tumultuous final year of the Vietnam War, was tightly written, a soundtrack jam-packed with period music, and featured tons of monster action, proving to be another hit for the studio. A welcoming resurgence for King Kong, which has swept cinema since his dashing debut in 1933. 2 years later, Godzilla King of the Monsters was released. While the film's soundtrack, color palettes, and roster of monsters including Godzilla, Mothra, Rodan, and King Ghidorah were brilliantly executed, the film suffered from mostly poor reviews and a lackluster box office showing. Additionally, the film's fight scenes were quite dark in comparison to that of Skull Island, which were brightly lit. Immediately following Godzilla King of the Monsters, and in spite of the negative reviews, fans and critics were eagerly awaiting the showdown between Godzilla and King Kong in the aptly named Godzilla vs. Kong, which was announced to be the fourth and final installment of the Monsterverse. As a lifelong Godzilla and giant monster movie fan, I waited patiently for the day when two of the most famous and legendary giant monsters duke it out on the screen in the 21st century. And I can safely say they delivered spectacularly. Finally, after nearly 60 years, we finally have a rematch between Godzilla and King Kong. And this film was just absolutely astonishing, both in terms of visual effects and as well as monster action in general. Of course, I can't really talk about the film without providing at least some kind of plot synopsis, but without giving too many spoilers away, basically what happens is Godzilla is angry. For an unknown reason, he is rampaging and he is becoming a major threat to humanity, or at least that is how some characters perceive it. A group of researchers belonging to Monarch, an organization monitoring giant monsters or titans throughout the world, monitors Kong as he is placed in a dome on Skull Island, his supposed home. Long story short, the Monarch researchers embark on a journey to find Kong's true home in what is called the Hollow Earth, a mysterious terrain below the Earth's surface filled with mysterious monsters. However, a malevolent international organization views both Godzilla and Kong as threats, and from there, all hell breaks loose as nothing but monstrous mayhem ensues, which leads me to talk about the very meat of the film, and that being the monster fights. Of course, the monster fights is really what the audience wants to see, and really the only thing that people generally care about. And the monster fights in this film are excellent. The lighting is actually fantastic, which really can't be said for Godzilla 2014 and Godzilla King of the Monsters, two previous installments in the Monsterverse, the cinematic universe of which Godzilla vs. Kong is a part of. The lighting is very pristine, as you could basically see all the damage, as well as how gorgeous the monsters actually look themselves. With the amount of time that the film had in terms of post-production due to constant delays, it only makes sense that the monsters look as fantastic as ever. A common flaw when it comes to modern monster movies in general, and especially giant monster movies, is the fight scenes generally take place at night as opposed to during the day, meaning you really can't see anything. A lot of people say that's largely because the darkness essentially conceals the imperfections of CGI, but in Skull Island, the fight scenes were very brightly lit and you could basically see everything, although to be fair, the monsters in that film were pretty small. The fights in Godzilla vs. Kong were not only spectacular, but they were actually very akin to a lot of the fights in the classic Godzilla movies, especially in the 60s and 70s, which largely took place during the day, and the fights in those films were exclusively held during the day. One thing that I found really cool about this film as well was the amount of collateral damage that you see in a lot of the monster scenes, especially the scene in which Godzilla's tail emerges from above the water and you see a fighter jet just collide into it, amounting to this huge explosion. I love that. Again, in the classic Godzilla films, there were some shots and scenes in which it only just took Godzilla's tail for entire structures to collapse, which is something I really miss. Regarding the human story, I know I might be breaking away from majority opinion here, but I really didn't mind it. I mean, sure, it was half-baked, but with these films, that's to be expected, especially since the human characters are really just there for expositionary purposes, as opposed to any major substance, at least in most of the films. They're just there to move the plot along to get to what we actually want to see, the destruction, the monster fights, and so on. Although I do like the ambiguity in the human story as well, how we have Team Kong versus Team Godzilla, which obviously reflects the real-life Team Kong and Team Godzilla, which waited so eagerly for the film to be released in the first place. And to tell you the truth, I was actually a little more attached to the Kong side of the story as opposed to Team Godzilla, really only because of one reason, and that being Gia. The little deaf girl, which has a very intricate connection to Kong, made the entire film for me, honestly, at least as it pertains to the human elements. It was a neat twist on the classic Kong having a connection with a girl trope seen in basically all Kong movies. The actress who portrayed Gia, Kaylee Hoddle, did an absolutely excellent job and was really the finest acting factor the film had to offer to me. It kept me hooked. An absolutely talented young actress, and initially I was very moved at the fact that they actually gave her a platform of which she can utilize her acting capabilities, and she absolutely excelled. She did a fantastic job. This is a really huge deal for the deaf community, and it is very nice to see. Below in the description, I provided a link to an interview of which Hoddle was actually explaining that on set, oftentimes the written lines of dialogue in the screenplay fail to adequately match up with the ASL, of which, as you can imagine, a great deal of miscommunication and confusion was spurred on set. Overall, the film is an absolute blast. It's really the Hollywood blockbuster that we need right now to really alleviate ourselves, and the box office revenue is truly reflecting that, given the fact that the movie is, in a way, single-handedly resurrecting the entire movie-going experience, theatrical-wise. You probably have already seen the film. It's been out for a few days now, but if not, it really wouldn't hurt to check it out. You really wouldn't be disappointed, and even if you're not a Godzilla or Kong fan, then I think generally speaking, you're still going to enjoy it nonetheless. It truly is, in my honest view, the best American Godzilla film yet, and given the fact that this is actually the 36th Godzilla movie, it's certainly about time. It features everything that made the Toho films great, really. I mean, you have the monster mash, you have the destruction, you have the half-baked human story. You really have all of that, and so much more. It's truly a fun ride. One last thing. For those who are gaining a bit of an interest in Godzilla, Kong, or giant monsters and kaiju in general, I have a couple films to actually recommend, or four really. And you can really watch these films before or after viewing Godzilla vs. Kong, it really doesn't matter. To truly understand and gauge where Godzilla and King Kong truly came from, I would just start at the beginning, because really, you wouldn't be disappointed. Specifically with King Kong from 1933 and Gojira, or Godzilla, from 1954. Both films are truly some of the best of their kind, if not the best of their kind, in general. I even regard the original King Kong as arguably the most revolutionary film ever made. I mean, the stop-motion animation, the fact that the entire film soundtrack was conducted by an orchestra, the gripping special effects in general with the skyscrapers and all the different shots and dynamics. I mean, the film truly is a genuine masterpiece of filmmaking. In fact, it's even shown in film classes. Or if you're more into a contemporary telling of Kong, then I would definitely check out the 2005 Peter Jackson King Kong movie, which actually takes place the same year that the original 1933 film takes place in 33. And it's a little long, but if you're into CGI more so than practical effects, I would certainly opt for the Peter Jackson version instead. And the original Godzilla is a dark metaphor wrapped in a chilling and almost existentialist blanket. Truly a masterpiece, and I can go on about that film for so many hours. Even to this day, the vast majority of Godzilla fans consider the 54 original to be the greatest that the Godzilla franchise has to offer. Now, in the beginning I said that this matchup was really nearly 60 years in the making, as it's a rematch, and that's because Godzilla and Kong actually fought once before in 1962. In 1962's King Kong vs. Godzilla, both behemoths actually butted heads and fought against each other. Now, of course, the film is especially cheesy, and King Kong's suit looks abysmal, to say the least. But to tell you the truth, the film is still really fun, and I remember liking it quite a bit as a kid. It's really good that we have a Godzilla vs. Kong match, both for the 20th century and now for the 21st century. Very fitting and very cool to think about. All in all, Godzilla vs. Kong is really the Hollywood blockbuster that we truly need right now. And obviously, the better this film does critically and financially, the higher the chance we'll see Godzilla, Kong, as well as old and new monsters alike in the future. But until then, long live the kings.